MySQL 5.0?
So the question is, does the enterprise backup work with 5.0? Yes, 5.0 and above. Yeah. So just some of the features, again, high performance. You can do, as of the last release, you can do incremental backups. I heard it was in there before, and people were telling me it was kind of buggy and don't use it for that, but we have a new release that supposedly fixed all the bugs. You can do compression, you can do one-time recovery. One of the newest things that was added was streaming file support. So you can now back up to a single file. Have the whole backup go to a single file. Or you can stream it to some other utility. So you can pipe it to whatever you want from the stream, the backup file. You can pipe it to an SSH command that will send the backup actually to another server so that it doesn't land on your local server when you do a backup. And we've added support for backing up to tape devices using the SBT interface. So it's a common interface it's the same interface that RMAN uses for backing up to tape. Since we're part of Oracle, we get to take advantage of some things. That's one of the things we get to take advantage of, the work they've already done for having RMAN back up to tape. Enterprise backup can now back up to tape. So I'll ask the question, and I think I know the answer, but has anybody ever seen Enterprise Monitor? Besides Bear? You've seen it? Okay, good. So if I have one database, not too big a deal for monitoring, keeping track of what's going on, you could probably do it with existing tools or Workbench or something. If I have 5 databases, yeah, some tools that'll help you. You probably can monitor things fairly okay. Maybe you're using Nagios or Netcool or some kind of systems monitoring tool and it's doing a fine job. If I have 100 MySQL databases, then maybe I could use some help. Maybe even if it's 10 or 50. So Enterprise Monitor is a way to monitor generally a larger number of MySQL servers. Still good for onesie-twosies if that's the case that you run into. But it'll monitor all aspects of the server running. There's about 150 metrics we'll monitor, or activities we'll monitor in the database. Locking, buffer cache, security problems, tables getting created, tables getting destroyed, indexes getting added. Anything that can happen at a database level, we've got, we call them advisors. They're basically rules. So a lot of people set up, they script things out, right? So you get a new database to support it, you write a bunch of scripts, whether it's in Perl or awk or bash or whatever. You automate things, and you automate it by scripting. So you can think of a rule in Enterprise Monitor as a script, because it's basically doing the same thing. It's looking at metrics within the database, doing some calculations, and figuring out if there's a problem there. That's what Enterprise Monitor provides. It provides you a way to get rid of all your scripts and have you do all that maintenance and let us do it. And it's customizable. You can add new rules. You can change rules that exist that we already have. Like I said, there's 150 today. We add about 10 or 15 on every release of new things. One of the newer things that I just learned that we added is we now have backup advisors. So we have advisors that will look and see when's the last time you did a backup. Is a backup holding a lock for some configurable amount of time? So we'll advise you on all of things. So there's, we add to it, we improve it with every release. If you already have a monitoring environment, again, you're using some kind of systems monitoring tool, we can tie into that using SNMP. So we can send an SNMP trap to an existing tool so that you don't have to keep this running all the time. So we tie into existing environments. The big thing, one of the big things that was added over the last few years is query analysis. And again, we're trying to give folks extra help in figuring out what's going on in your enterprise servers, in your monitors, in your database servers. So this goes a step beyond really than an explain plan, the query analysis. But we'll touch on that a little more in a second. So, what the? Who's doing that? We'll see if it stays. So from a deployment standpoint, what does it look like? So,
You want a remote USB clicker?
I'm just going to stay here. When it does it again, I'm going to go back and what? So, enterprise monitor. All right. Obviously, I didn't run this and look at it before. So quickly, so there's a server that gets set up. So you would load one of your boxes probably with the server piece of this. On each of the MySQL servers you want it to monitor, there's an agent that runs. Today we use agents. We're working towards an agentless model, but today we do use database agents. This is a lightweight C client. It connects to the database, gathers some information, and sends it to the server. The way you view that information is through a browser. All right, now you can let it go. Thank you. So you use any browser that you have, you connect to, it's just using JavaScript to render the pages. We use MySQL as a repository to store all this information, which is how we can scale up to, today we can scale up to about 350 or 400 instances that we can monitor within one tool set. So there's a large number of advisors. Like I said, there's about 150 or so roles or advisors or whatever you want to call them that range from administration. So just basic administration advisors on the database, buffer caches that are set up, key cache rates, buffer cache rates for NODB. There's schema advisors that will let you know if a table's been changed, dropped, added. With the database, it's the same thing for a database, same thing for an index, same thing for any kind of database object. There's schema advisors that will track that. Probably more importantly, there's security advisors. So if somebody adds, if I have a lot of databases I'm responsible for, I might want to know if somebody's adding a new user to those databases. Like I said, maybe you already have something set up. Maybe things are locked down well enough that you don't think that'll happen. But it'd be nice to know if somebody creates a user account on there. It'd be even nicer to know if they create a user account and they give that account super user privileges so that that account can do pretty much anything to the database. So we'll, of course, advise on all that. We'll let you know if somebody changed privileges on an account and give you details on what's actually changed. There's also, of course, performance, memory usage, replication advisors that you can set up. Now, in reality, you're not going to turn on all advisors for every database you have. There's going to be certain things you care about on a day-to-day basis, on an ongoing basis, that you will want to turn on. The others might be more of onesie-twosie, let's turn this on for a while and see what's going on. So in reality, you might have 10 or 15 or 20 core ones that you would set up. There's also graphing that you can do. So you can look at database activity, you can look at connections, database connections, you can look at NODB graphs, locking graphs. By default, we keep all information for however long you want. So you can do historical analysis against the server to see, from a locking standpoint, are the locks growing? Are they, over time, are they growing? Over, a month, are they going up? So there's a lot of analysis you can do from a historical basis. One of the ones I wanted to point out was there is a always changing list, and changing meaning we're adding to them constantly, of upgrade advisors. So you're running 5.0 today, right?
Yeah.
So do you know if there's any bugs that have been fixed in 5.0 since you started running? And if you do, how do you keep track of them?
Just through the community.
Okay, that's a good answer. So just through the community, maybe, if you set up a profile with MySQL and you had support, maybe they let you know that there was a new release, and maybe you look through that release notes to see what's changed. We actually have a number of advisors that will go through and look at the version you're running, and if there's any kind of serious bug that we fixed since you've run that version. It could be from a privileges standpoint. So one of the bugs that's in older releases of MySQL is anybody that does a create table statement, they don't have to have privileges to the table they're running it against. So I can do a create table like against the source table, and I might not have any privileges against that source table. Well, there was a bug that let you do that, even when you didn't have privileges to that base table. So that could be a security consideration. So those types of things are what upgrade advisors are about. So it's not every bug that we fix. It's important, maybe security-related bugs that we're fixing. And combing through all your instances of MySQL and letting you know if you're running an older instance that has that bug that you might not be aware of. So out of all our advisors, I think these are kind of some of the most interesting ones. So why are we different from Tivoli or OpenView or Nagios or Netcool or anybody else that can do monitoring of MySQL? Well, especially for those that are coming in and learning MySQL, we give you a nice description over what the actual problem is. So if we find a problem and one of the advisors trips, we'll tell you what the problem is, advice on how to fix it. Sometimes we'll tell you what the current value is and what our recommended value would be. And okay, so if you know the recommended value to set it to, how do you set it? So do you set it in the my.config file? What is the my.config file? What's the command to set it in the my.config file? Do I set it in a running session? Can I just log into the server and do a setting? So we can give you advice into those types of things. How to change it in the config file, or how to just run a set command to change it in a running server, if it's possible. The Advanced tab, I don't show it, but the Advanced tab will actually show you the actual statement that we ran. So it'll show you the rule that was violated. If you're running replication, great way to figure out and monitor all your... I'm just going to stop. Great way to figure out if your replication's running behind, what your replication topology is. So it's funny. So we turned this on at some customers, and that previous screen, just remember what it looked like. So we turned this on at some customers, and they got back the topology of their replication setup, and they didn't believe us. They looked at it and said, oh, no, that slave's not set up as a master. And we'll go, yes, it is. It's got the binary log turned on. It's set up as a master. So they were kind of surprised, but it works pretty well. So anyway, great way to keep tabs on replication, how far behind a slave is, all the stuff that Tony had talked about, where it is in the relay log, where it is in the master binary log, and those types of things. All right, so query analysis is a really, 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 really nice feature of Enterprise Monitor. So the one thing that shops got excited about, these are some of the big web shops that run MySQL and are long-time MySQL users, is they were one of the first ones on board to be able to run this in beta. They really wanted to run the query analyzer. Because there's ways to do it, really. If you really want to analyze all the queries that are going on, you're going to probably write some ways or write some scripts or write some utilities to do that kind of analysis. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to maintain. Our query analysis goes even a step further. So we'll analyze all queries running across all servers and consolidate them down to basically what we call a canonicalized view of the query. So if I have 5 servers that I have set up in a replication farm to serve my website, and I round robin across those 5 servers, I can tell you what query gets run across those 5 servers, how often they get run, who runs them, what the result set size is on average, what the result set size is max, maximum run times, those types of things. Even if that same query has been seen across 5 servers, I'll look at it once and be able to consolidate all that information. So why does it matter? Why would you care? What could you find out? In MySQL, it's easy to find what queries are slow. Right? There's a log called slow query log in MySQL. What does it log? It logs all queries that take longer than a configurable amount of time to run. But those are easy to find. What's not so easy to find is, what are the servers that might be causing impact what are the queries that might be causing impact that maybe they get run too frequently, Maybe they're just consuming more resources than I think they're consuming, but they never show up in the slow query log. So one of the customers, and this is an actual customer case, is they loaded the beta of Query Analyzer, they turned it on their servers, and within 15 minutes, a query bubbled up to the top. And that one query was, average runtime was under a second, easily under a second. So it wasn't a slow query. The problem is that they saw it run 40,000 times in the time they were monitoring, over like 15 minutes. So they started scratching their heads, like, where's this query coming from? You know, what is this query doing? Where's it coming from? So they quickly went into the code and found it in the code and found out that it was inside of a loop and it didn't need to be inside of a loop. So they took it outside of the loop. All of a sudden, they got about 25% of their machine back, just by doing that, just by taking that one query and moving it. So there was a fair amount of DBAs in the crowd, right? And then another fair amount of developers. So there's always, I found there's some contention between DBAs and developers sometimes where, you know, developers will do stuff and make the DBAs mad, and the DBAs go back to the developers, and developers go, oh no, I didn't do anything. I call this a DBA tool. Because it lets you go back to the developer and say, yes, you did.
That general query log does too.
Anyway, a great way to analyze, I compare it to, and I tell this to everyone, but I compare it to profiling the database. How do I tell from a database standpoint what activity is going on against it across all my clients, not from a single client? So I really compare it to a database profiling. So just a great tool to have to figure things out. What you see highlighted there is that we have a mechanism to just show you the queries that are run within a particular point in time, or a particular slice in time. So I can look at a database activity graph, see a spike, and say, show me everything that's running that spike. So what else will we do? So in this same thing, we'll give you an explain plan for those that want to see an explain plan for a query. Good God almighty. All right. 1 second. Let's do this. It's not very big, is it? There. Except I can't see my explain plan. All right, we'll quickly go to explain plan. So you can highlight a query, and it'll show you the explain plan for the query without resorting to a command line terminal and bringing up MySQL and typing explain, blah, 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 doing copy paste. Great time saver. The other thing that it'll do, and this kind of depends on which driver you're using, the client's using to connect to MySQL. But today, if you're using the JDBC driver or the .NET driver, we can trace a SQL statement back to the original line of code that it came from. So if I really need to know where's the SQL statement coming from, I don't have to start combing through the code. It'll give me the stack trace back for Java and show me the exact line of code that SQL statement came from. So just a big time saver. It'll do the same thing for the .NET environment. And we're adding it to the PHP driver and to the C library. So we're adding it to other protocol drivers so that they can take advantage of that. So we ship, like I said, about 150 rules. You can add your own rule by just creating a new one. So I can say, go to the Advisors tab, go to Manage Rules, say create a rule, give it a name. The expression will be driven from the metrics that you set up. So basically, I can start assigning variables. So I can look at the locks that are being set. I can look at OS metrics. So I can look at file system sizes. One rule that we don't have in the server, but it's easy to create is well, show me the file system usage for this file system that the database is running on. And the reason we don't have it yet is I think it's not something we can easily generalize, because you don't know what file system names. It's a hard thing to get the file system names. But anyway, it's a quick way to set up 3 variables for checking the file system. The name of the file system, the total space available, and the space being used. And do a calculation to see how full it is, and to advise on it. So it's a quick way to create your own rule. Another thing you can do that's sometimes even faster is I can copy an existing rule. So here's a rule that says, show me when any schema change has taken place. So for a database, table, or index, show me when it's been added, dropped, or modified. And let's say, well, I just want a rule that does it for tables. I don't care about everything else. So it's pretty easy to go in there, take off everything else, just go down to the tables and say, I just want to see when the table has been added, created, or dropped, and create my custom rule. So, easily, maybe 5 minutes to create your own custom rule. When you add a new rule, you can give it your own problem description. You can give it your own advice. You can say, if this happens, call this DBA on this pager number and wake them up and tell them to fix it. So you can put whatever you want in there. So let's go and use Workbench and generate some events and see what actually happens from a monitor. So I go into Workbench. I'm just going to say create table. There's my create table statement. And voila, I go and check my events. I go to my events tab, and I see, Craig's gone, and look at that, created a table. So why is it in there 3 times? Well, I created it against the master server, and I had 2 slaves running off of that master server. So it shows me, and I'm monitoring all of them. So it showed me I've created the table basically on 3 servers in a replication setup. So the cool thing is, well, there's my create table statement, or the advice that it gives me. And if I look at the details on that rule, on that event that happened, I can see where it came from, who the user was, other things, how long it took, and what host they did it against, so what database server they did it against. So I can look at details on who created the table. Now, I have to be running Query Analyzer at the time to do this, but I can get the detail if I am running. Same thing, I'm going to go and use the user and privileges section in Workbench, and I'm going to add myself a new user. Add a new user to the database. Better watch the way I talk, because my wife will jump on me. So again, I can go into the events, and now since I have the security advisors running, it tells me when a new user's been added. So again, it happened 3 times, but I can see somebody's created a new user on my replication setup. Maybe I'm aware of it, maybe I'm not, but at least I know it happened. I said that you can use SNMP to get this information to another server. You can also send an email, send a page, or whatever. And then there is an SNMP interface into Enterprise Monitor also to get that information. Last part, performance and stress testing. This is quick. How am I doing on time? Am I running over? I talked too long?
That's
Okay.
fine.
This is
You still
pretty
have
much
3
it.
minutes until 2.
Okay. There's a couple of common tools for doing stress testing against MySQL. Sysbench is probably the most common, I would guess, for setting up a testing environment and running a set of queries against the server and getting some metrics out of it. DBT2 is another one that's available. And there's the links to those tools if you wanted to start setting up a MySQL environment and testing it out, doing some stress testing. Probably more important as you go from one release to the next and seeing if the next release is really going to help. Lots of resources available. Any of the current releases from MySQL are available on eDelivery. That is the commercial versions, just to be, to let everybody know, but eDelivery does have the most current releases of all the products, Enterprise Monitor, the MySQL Server, all, configure the cluster manager, all those products are available on a trial basis from the eDelivery site. The main site for MySQL is just mysql.com. We have a great dev site. We have a great community. People that have been in the community for years contribute a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of criticism where it's needed to keep us honest. But MySQL is very much wanting to keep up with the community and strives to do the best we can for the community. But the dev site is one way that the community helps there. Our documentation is online, available. The nice thing is that people can contribute to our documentation by adding comments to the end of it. So you'll see as you read through the documentation sometimes, if you look in the comments, they will maybe clarify what's in the documentation or say, oh, this is not really the way it works on Windows. This is how it really works on Windows. So just, again, part of the community feedback. There's forums available through that website. Any of the GPL downloads are also available through the dev website. Any other questions? Is everybody still awake?
Of all the tools mentioned, do they all work with cluster?
So the question was, of all the tools mentioned, do they all work with cluster? Definitely like the MySQL client does, the Workbench does. Enterprise Monitor can monitor cluster. It can monitor the data nodes now, along with the MySQL server nodes that are there. It won't get into some of the details that Cluster Manager lets you do, but from a monitoring standpoint, you can. Just about any of the performance tools you could run in cluster because they're all SQL based. So anything there can be done. Things like MySQL admin, some of the things that are specific to the MySQL server would be applicable to the MySQL server part of cluster, but not necessarily to the data nodes.
But the backup and recovery tool?
Well, the cluster has its own backup tool. So you can run MySQL export, definitely, or MySQL import for trading data in and out of a cluster. So that works fine. Yes?
Thank you. Has the MySQL have the capability to do generic statistical analysis and represent the results in graphic form?
Statistic analysis, generic statistic analysis,
Yeah.
and presented in graphic form. There's some capabilities in Monitor, because there's some graphic capabilities and what type of, so otherwise what are you looking for?
Well, when you do a population study,
Oh, those types of